Questions and answers about embracing the Lotus Sutra. Question: I have had the rare opportunity to be born a human being and the good fortune to encounter Buddhism, but it is said that there are shallow teachings and there are profound teachings, and that some people rank high in capacity while others rank low. Just what teachings should I practice to attain Buddhahood as quickly as possible? I beg you to instruct me on this point. Answer: each family has its respected elders, and each province its persons of noble station. But although people all look up to their particular lord and pay honor to their own parents, could anyone stand higher than the ruler of the nation? In the same way, confrontations between the Mahayana and Hinayana, or between the provisional and true teachings, are comparable to disputes among rival houses. But among all the sacred teachings expounded by the Buddha in the course of his lifetime, the Lotus Sutra alone holds the position of absolute superiority. It is the guidepost that points the way to the immediate attainment of perfect wisdom, the carriage that takes us at once to the place of enlightenment. Question: as I understand it, a teacher is someone who has grasped the central meaning of the sutras and treatises and who writes commentaries explaining them. If that is so, then it is only natural that the teachers of the various schools should each formulate doctrines according to their own understanding, and on that basis write their commentaries, establish principles, and dedicate themselves to the attainment of enlightenment. How could such efforts be in vain? To insist that the Lotus Sutra alone holds the position of absolute superiority is to adopt too narrow a view, I believe. Answer: if you think that to proclaim the absolute superiority of the Lotus Sutra is to take too narrow a view, then one would have to conclude that no one in the world was more narrow-minded than Shakyamuni Buddha. I am afraid you are greatly mistaken in this matter. Let me quote from one of the sutras and from the commentary of one school, and see if I can resolve your confusion. The Immeasurable Meaning Sutra says, quote, "Because people's natures and desires are not alike, I preach the law in various different ways. Preaching the law in various different ways, I made use of the power of expedient means. But in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth." Close quote. Hearing this pronouncement, Great Adornment and the others of the 80,000 bodhisattvas replied in unison, voicing their understanding that, quote, "As for those living beings who are unable to hear this sutra, though immeasurable, boundless, inconceivable asamkhya kalpas may pass, they will in the end fail to gain unsurpassed enlightenment." Close quote. And this is not the only passage of this type. The Expedient Means chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, "The world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth." Close quote. It also says, quote, "In the Buddha lands of the 10 directions, there is only the law of the one vehicle. There are not 2. There are not 3. Close quote. These passages mean that only this Lotus Sutra represents the truth. Again, in the 2nd volume it says, quote, "I am the only person who can rescue and protect others." Close quote. And it speaks of, quote, "desiring only to accept and embrace the sutra of the great vehicle and not accepting a single verse of the other sutras." Close quote. These passages mean that only Shakyamuni Buddha can save and protect all living beings, and that one should wish to accept and uphold only the Lotus Sutra and never even a verse from any other sutra. It also says, quote, "If a person fails to have faith, but instead slanders this sutra, immediately he will destroy all the seeds for becoming a Buddha in this world." Question: but what about the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra that state, quote, "This is the foremost sutra," or, quote, "This is the king of sutras"? If one were to go by what you have said, then one would have to reject these pronouncements, which are the words of the Buddha himself. Is this not so? Answer. Although these earlier sutras may include such statements as, "This is the foremost sutra," or "This is the king of sutras," they are all nevertheless provisional teachings. One should not rely on such pronouncements. The Buddha himself commented on this point when he said, quote, "Rely on sutras that are complete and final, and not on those that are not complete and final." Close quote. And the great teacher Miao Lo stated, quote, "Though other sutras may call themselves the king among sutras, there is none that announces itself as foremost among all the sutras preached in the past, now being preached or to be preached in the future. Thus one should understand them according to the principle of combining, excluding, corresponding, and including." Close quote. This passage of commentary is saying in essence that even if there should be a sutra that calls itself the king of sutras, if it does not also declare itself superior to those preached before it and those to be preached after, then one should know that it is a sutra belonging to the expedient teachings. It is the way of the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra to say nothing concerning the sutras that would be preached in the future. Only in the case of the Lotus Sutra, because it is the final and ultimate statement of the Buddha's teachings, do we find a clear pronouncement that this sutra alone holds the place of absolute superiority, quote, "among the sutras I have preached, now preach, and will preach." Close quote. Hence, one commentary states, quote, "Only in the Lotus Sutra did the Buddha explain the meaning of his earlier teachings and clarify the true meaning of this present teaching." Close quote. Thus, we may see that in the Lotus Sutra, the Thus Come One gave definite form both to his true intention and to the methods to be used in teaching and converting living beings. It is for this reason that Tianchai stated, quote, "After the Thus Come One attained enlightenment, for 40 years and more he did not reveal the truth. With the Lotus Sutra, he, for the first time, revealed the truth." Close quote. In other words, for more than 40 years after the Thus Come One went out into the world, he did not reveal the true teaching. In the Lotus Sutra, he, for the first time, revealed the true way that leads to the attainment of Buddhahood. Question. I understand what you say about the Lotus Sutra being foremost among all the sutras that the Buddha, quote, "has preached, now preaches, and will preach." But is there a certain teacher who says that the statement, quote, "in these more than 40 years I have not revealed the truth," close quote, is meant to apply only to the voice hearers who were able to achieve Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra? It does not apply to the bodhisattvas who had already gained the benefit of enlightenment through the sutras preached prior to the Lotus Sutra. What is your opinion on this matter? Answer. You are referring to the view that the Lotus Sutra was preached for the benefit of those of the two vehicles and not for bodhisattvas, and that the words, quote, "I have not yet revealed the truth," therefore apply only to the two vehicles. The assertion that the statement, quote, "I have not yet revealed the truth," was made for the sake of people of the two vehicles is, in itself, completely reasonable. The reason is that, from the beginning, the fundamental purpose of the Thus Come One's preaching was to open the way to enlightenment for the people of the two vehicles, and the methods of instruction used throughout his teaching life, as well as the skillful means exhibited in his 3 cycles of preaching, were chiefly employed for them. In the Flower Garland Sutra, beings dwelling in hell are deemed able to become Buddhas, but voice hearers and cause-awakened ones are condemned as incapable of doing so. In the Correct and Equal Sutras, it is stated that, just as lotus flowers cannot grow on the peak of a high mountain, so the people of the two vehicles have scorched the seeds of Buddhahood and hence can never attain it. And in the Wisdom Sutras, we read that persons who have committed the 5 cardinal sins can attain Buddhahood, but that those of the two vehicles are rejected as unable to do so. The Thus Come One now declared, as his true intention, that these pitiful abandoned persons could indeed attain Buddhahood, using this as a standard to demonstrate the superiority of the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, Tiantai stated, quote, "Neither the Flower Garland Sutra nor the larger Wisdom Sutra could cure the plight of these persons of the two vehicles. The Lotus Sutra alone was able to produce the roots of goodness in those who have nothing more to learn, and to make it possible for them to attain the Buddha way. Therefore, the sutra is called Myo, or wonderful." Again, the Ichantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief, nevertheless have minds, and so it is still possible for them to attain Buddhahood. But persons of the two vehicles have annihilated consciousness, and therefore cannot arouse the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And yet the Lotus Sutra can cure them, which is why it is called Myo, or wonderful. Close quote. There is no need for me to explain in detail the import of this passage. With regard to this point, the great teacher Miao Lo stated, quote, "In the various sutras, it is sometimes taught that beings in all other paths are led to the true path of Buddhahood, but there is absolutely no hope offered to the two vehicles. Therefore, in the Lotus Sutra, beings in the six paths are grouped with bodhisattvas as being assured of Buddhahood, and the power of the sutra is set forth with respect to those of the two vehicles, for whom Buddhahood is the most difficult to achieve." Close quote. Indeed, Tiantai established that the attainment of Buddhahood by persons of the two vehicles is proof that all living beings, without exception, can become Buddhas.